The national leaders of the All Progressives Congress, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, yesterday cleverly declared his decision to take his chances in the 2023 presidential election in Nigeria. The former governor of Lagos State hinted at this in Abuja after a closed-door meeting with leaders of the Northern Alliance Committee. He insisted that he will not decline the many calls by supporters and admirers of him to contest, but would still consult widely before finally declaring his intention for the 2023 presidential poll. However, leader of the Northern Alliance Committee group, Lawal Mune, while endorsing Tinubu's presidential ambition, also revealed that the meeting resolved to work towards the actualization of his ambition in 2023. Mr. Ifeanyi, finally, we see this way that he has cleverly declared his ambition to run. I mean, we've been talking about Tinubu running for the president of Nigeria. He has basically said it with this confirmation at this point. What do you think?
Well, personally, I will not even add the adjective
clever. It wasn't that clever?
The adverb cleverly, he has declared his intention to run. We've seen it all this while, the group going around. The well-funded Southwest Agenda, Swagger. They've been coasting around the Southwest with real swagger, if you will, no pun intended. And you know that group was a group put together to do a job. And they've been going around meeting traditional rulers, meeting interest groups, drumming support for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So, meeting this group, I don't know, this is the first time I'm hearing of this group, Northern Alliance. Again, another group to rub minds with them about his ambition, obviously. And now he said, but what I don't seem to get is, why do you have to say, if you want to run, tell us you are running? Because we don't want a president tomorrow who is uninterested but was dragged by his people into the scene. If you want to run, you tell Nigerians you want to run. But if you read that report, he did say, I will consult widely and I will make my, before we declare, we'll make our agenda known to Nigerians before we declare. So he has declared, that clever? I'm not too sure it was, because it's a very familiar pattern. I was pushed or dragged by my people or by people.
What do you mean is a very familiar pattern?
Within that,
people that want to run or just, okay.
They tell you, my people say I should run. People say I should run. But he wants to run, and if you've been in this Lagos, you know this is a carefully choreographed political steps arriving at this point that he has at least said it himself. I will take up the offer as my people or as the people are requesting. But again, it is the right of every Nigerian and the right of Bola Ahmed Tinubu to aspire to the highest office of the land. You cannot take that away from him. At the appropriate time, I'm sure he will put forward his programs, and Nigerians will assess him, because he was one of those who sold President Muhammadu Buhari to Nigerians as the man who will change our fortunes. Whether our fortunes have changed is very clear for everybody to decide. Whether Nigerians will forgive him for also selling President Buhari, whether he has done a good job, is also something I think we'll all assess at the appropriate time. But what he has done as a governor in Lagos State, and of course his political dynasty has been in charge of Lagos State, given the resources available to Lagos State over time, have they done very well? Is that a model we should take to the federal level? These are questions we'll answer at the appropriate time.
More importantly, more questions people are asking. When are we going to see new faces running for presidency?
I mean, that's a
And we're
valid
seeing
question.
These familiar faces.
Faces all over
all
again.
the time, all over again.
So, Oji, there's a Yoruba adage that says, the witch cried yesterday, the child died today. You cannot exonerate the witch from the child that died today. I am not surprised, because the book launch, there was a reason for it. It was timing. It was to test the waters, to gather reactions. It is not out of place that the book launch happened just last week, and this is coming out this week. So I've always known that he wants to run. And he has the right to run. Just like only yesterday in Imo, there was a big support group that gathered around for Vice President Yemi Osinbajo.
Yes.
That one too is happening in Imo. He's not officially declared, but a lot of groups are gathering and they're saying he must run. In fact, we all remember the story of how they had an outlet, an office in Abuja, and the Vice President distanced himself for it. One thing has to be said, and one positive I'll take away from you, Mr. Finn, this morning is the fact that we must have leaders that are bold enough to come out and say, I want to serve Nigerians. It must not be about a group that is still propped up by these same people, and probably sponsored by them, that is forcing you to run. Because you see, the problems we have now in Nigeria, it's not about something that people can be forced to run. We have many challenges. Nigeria, as we speak today, has increased its debt stock from 2015 to about 9 trillion to 38 trillion now. So we've added over 20 trillion more to our debt stock. And the thing about debt is you have to pay back. Nigeria suffers with a high inflation rate, over 15% inflation rate. Nigeria suffers with 33% unemployment. From 2015, the unemployment rate was about 10%, but now it is 33.3%. That's what Nigeria suffers from. Nigeria suffers from a naira that has lost its value. In 2015, the naira to the dollar was less than 250. Today, it's over 500. Those are the challenges on ground. So we don't need a group to beg you to run, because the work ahead of you is bigger.
It's big.
I think the question we should ask them, what do they have for the people? Because you see, we make the mistake too much in this country. Like Mario Cuomo said, we campaign in poetry and govern in prose. We make the mistake of focusing on the campaigning in poetry without talking about the prose of governance. So as they are saying all of this, they should not forget to tell us what they have for Nigeria. How will that reduce the inflation rates? What are going to be their policies? How will they reduce unemployment rate from 33%? How will they pay back the debt of over 38 trillion?
I'm sure they'll do all of that during their campaign.
Yes, at the appropriate time,
all
he
right.
will unfold his program, I want to believe also.
Absolutely. Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus Odiri and Michael Wilson to give us updates on Africa global business activities across the globe. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning, good morning to you all. Mainland Chinese markets, first of all. Really, everybody's still worrying about Omicron and also the Chinese economic data which came out this morning. Shanghai Composite down about 0.1%, really. Not a great deal of interest there. Chinese biotech firm BeiGene making its debut on Shanghai's Nasdaq-style market, which is good, and offer price of 192.6. That's $30.24. However, the stock opened 8.1% below that. That's the big market move as far as introducing stocks are concerned. China's retail sales grow by 3.9% in November. That's slower than expected. Fewer people are going shopping, and that does include the big Singles Day online event as well, which is meant to boost shopping. So that's falling. A bit of domestic demand news from there. Let's move to Japan. Toyota is to invest $35 billion into battery-powered electric vehicles, EVs, and roll out 30 models by 2030. Most of because current electric cars are hybrids, but these are going to be battery-only electric vehicles at the moment, which only take up a fraction of the sales. Let us move to the United States, and of course, all the big eyes are moving towards what the Fed's going to say in its minutes this evening. It's expected to take a very big step towards its first rate hike. Not expecting a rate hike today, but big steps towards that, i.e., closing down its asset purchasing operation very, very gradually, called tapering in the trade. So it's a wall of worry, really, yesterday. And the Fed is likely to give us an idea of how it views inflation. That'll be the big thing, whether they still use this word transitory or something else, which we've talked about many, many times, and no doubt will continue to talk about it. Google in the United States has told its employees they'll lose pay and eventually be fired if they don't have vaccinations. Most US employees will fall under their vaccine requirements, and that, of course, stems from what President Biden was saying in his executive order last month. Here's an interesting one. So the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, there she is. She's told the Bank of England to raise interest rates without delay. What the IMF knows about the UK economy, well, this is its annual health check. However, I still think that what will happen is, given the uncertainties, there's no question that inflation's here to stay, but given the uncertainties of where this new variant's going to take us, and some people are saying that it's already going to be no worse than flu. Who knows? There's an enormous amount of uncertainty. I think, I could be wrong, I probably will be, but I think that tomorrow lunchtime we'll be finding out that the Bank of England has once again stayed its hand as far as raising interest rates are concerned. But what do I know? I will probably be proved wrong and be very happy to do so too. UK unemployment rises. We got those figures yesterday. They were the October figures, despite the end of furlough. It's felt, though, this does not take into account the new COVID variant, and retail and hospitality will suffer and so on. But unemployment is up to 4.2%, or rather down to that, which is better than it was pre the pandemic. In Parliament, again, I don't often talk politics, but this is important from a COVID and therefore market point of view. Crushing blow to Prime Minister Johnson's authority yesterday in the House of Commons. Yes, there will be COVID certification and all the rest of it, but it was a big blow to his government's plans there. New rules which kick in today will require proof of double vaccination or a recent negative test to enter certain values. I have to say, I don't see what's wrong with that, but many people think that's an assault on our individual freedoms. Good luck with that. UK banks are going to share their premises with each other. Now, this is quite important as well, because what's happening is, unlike you, where you've adopted this magnificent way of paying and so on, a lot of us pay in cash and therefore have to go into banks to stand in a queue and withdraw money. But banks don't like that because it costs them a lot to keep the staff in the branches. So there is an idea that maybe they will share them. Crude prices got punished again. COVID uncertainty equals lack of demand equals fall in the oil price. Again, the API oil inventory report from the United States saw a much smaller draw on their 3.1 million decline seen last week, 0.8 million last week. So in other words, oil price therefore falling. And gold, oh, poor old gold, yes. There it is in front of a Fed, possibly starting to raise interest rates. Who wants to have gold when you can invest in a higher dollar? That's the global view.
All right, Michael, thank you so much. So this time around, the IMF has stepped in this conversation. They've told the Bank of England to go ahead and increase interest rates. But there's also a word coming out of the Bank of England saying that we would have increased interest rates if Omicron had not happened. So will it take this pressure by Georgieva to push the BOE to increase interest rates? And once they do, then what will be the ripple effect on us here on this part of the pond? That's one. Number two, I hear energy companies now, Ofgem is telling them to have a stress test. So there's going to be procedures laid out for a stress test because of what energy companies went through recently. Is it really time for a stress test? Or, Kwesi Kwarteng, the business secretary, should do the needful as regards ensuring energy sufficiency and supply in the UK?
I guess at the sort of language that was going round the corridors of the Bank of England when they heard the IMF telling them what to do was pretty, how can I put it, choice, I would think, even though those ladies and gentlemen probably use very nice language. I suspect that they probably treated this view from the IMF, which is A, out of date, B, has nothing to do with the pandemic, and C, the general consensus is that the bank will once again wait until it has further ideas, because in fact, although employment is increasing and although inflation is rising, they still want to hold their hand slightly. They will take no notice whatsoever of what the IMF says, and if they do, they'll be failing in their duty. They're not beholden to the IMF, they're beholden eventually to Parliament, even though it's an independent bank, and therefore beholden to me as a voter. Nothing to do with the IMF. The IMF continually, A, gets things wrong, B, holds countries captive in terms of the stringent measures that they put after they've given money. What these people in Washington really know, what good old Georgieva actually knows, I do not know. But it's nothing to do with what we're facing now, which is a far massively increasing COVID variant. Now, the question is, will it be no worse than annual flu? That's what people are asking this morning. So, but still there is all this uncertainty. If I were the Bank of England, I'd risk ridicule, as they got last month, as you know, and I reported then, and not do anything to sit on their hands, but say, as soon as we see inflation rising and we consider it safe to do so, given we have a relatively clear picture of what's going on in the UK economy, then we will act. So that's the Bank of England. As far as stress tests on energy companies concerned, when in doubt, as a regulator, introduce a stress test. In other words, this is Ofgem playing for time. Everybody knows, every consumer knows, every energy company knows that the market, that the business model for energy companies is clearly now not fit for purpose. All it took was a rise in energy prices, which could happen at any kind of time, and then lots of these smaller companies not making any money because they don't have their own electrical generation or don't have enough customers are actually going bust. So what is Ofgem's stress test going to do? Increase the price of energy? I suspect it probably would. In the stress test, what's the answer? We know what the answer is. What is the point of it? I suspect it's prevarication and playing for time. I think there's going to be some serious questions asked of energy policy next year.
Well, Michael, I wanted to talk about Google asking its employees to provide a vaccination certificate. I believe they've given them January 18th for the deadline. You will think at this point, where big tech companies, there's a huge pushback for employees to come back into work. Do you know what it is that they're requiring for these employees to come in? And what are the legal implications for, maybe anti-vaxxers who would refuse to take the vaccine?
Yeah, so this was the doubt when Biden actually, when Biden said this and gave this executive order of mandatory testing. You're absolutely right. It depends on it depends on the company. It depends on the country. I mean, if we're following, if the UK were to follow this, and I don't think it's going to do at the moment, Austria appears to be going that way. There are severe constitutional and also legal problems as well. They're absolutely massive. I don't think that many people, certainly not in this country, have much sympathy with anti-vaxxers. I think it's polite to wear a mask. I'm not an epidemiologist, as you know, never claimed to be, but I wear a mask as a matter of politeness. And we went shopping yesterday. My wife and I went shopping yesterday. Went to a shopping centre, and it was mandatory to wear masks, and people were getting turned away from shops unless they wore a mask. I see nothing wrong with that. We're faced with something that we just don't know. As far as Google and people coming back to work is concerned, I mean, why not be vaccinated? I don't get the no, I'm not going to be vaccinated argument personally, and I don't think many people do. However, when Google says it's going to mandate it, then it runs into all sorts of difficulties as well. What you do is, in all these cases, in a democracy, is you set by example. It's quite simple. If you want to go to a football match or soccer match, or whatever you call it, then with your friends, and you're not vaccinated, you can't get in the ground, then you don't go to the football match. What's not to understand about that? Of course, you're going to go with the flow, aren't you? Go with the lateral flow, if you like.
I think that's a wise thing to do. Yeah.
The legal questions are going to be massive. No question about that.
Okay, Michael. Oil price coming down. U.S. pumped strategic reserve with its friends and got Saudi Arabia, the de facto leader of OPEC, to pump more into the market. And the price of oil is coming down. Is Joe Biden winning?
The oil price is coming down simply because people are looking at demand right now. Nothing to do with Saudi Arabia, nor is it to do with the increase that OPEC promised and has not said it won't deliver on. In other words, it's still delivering on that 400,000 extra per day on a monthly basis. It's not going back on that. But if you remember what OPEC Plus said at the time, if the price gets too low or production is suffering, as they would put it, then they reserve the right to call a meeting immediately. So all we're doing is we're seeing a day-to-day as far as the oil price is concerned. As soon as we get a definitive idea of how this new variant is going to affect demand, as soon as we get a definitive idea of where the United States is going with its asset purchases and its interest rate rises, and I could tie in the Bank of England, but it's tiny compared with the Fed, obviously, then we will get a much clearer idea of the oil price. All it's reacting to, as I said this morning, is demand actually coming down because of the Omicron variant. We're not sure about where that's going, not sure about how it's going to affect supply, not sure about how it's going to affect airlines. I mean, one thing, you may have touched on this yesterday, and certainly we ought to talk about it this morning, is of course the red line now being withdrawn, the red list being withdrawn from lots of African countries, which I hope will help some of the airlines. So that would be an increase in oil. But again, this is something which we probably wouldn't see until after the new year.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus Odiri to give us updates on Africa business. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Odiri is here to give us Africa business update. Over to you, Rotus. Good morning.
Good morning, Audrey. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Mr. Ifeni. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, we begin with the latest update from the Debt Management Office. They released an update on the total public debt, which is now at 38 trillion naira. It, of course, increased from about 35.1, 35.2 in the second quarter of 2021. The primary reason for this increase was the Eurobond, the $4 billion Eurobond that Nigeria issued back in September. Remember, it was oversubscribed. There was a lot of interest from overseas investors in getting their hands on that bond. So Nigeria's debt profile, according to international investors, is good. So remember, they were initially intended to borrow $3 billion, but because of the oversubscription and the interest from investors, that went to $4 billion. But as you can see, this is about, at official exchange rates, this is about $92 billion. So Nigeria's total public debt, including the federal government, the 36 states, the federal capital territory, is $8 billion away from $100 billion, whichever administration comes into power in 2023 is going to have to deal with. The flip side of this is that this $4 billion Eurobond that came in has, of course, increased our reserves. It has allowed the Central Bank of Nigeria to be able to defend the currency, keep it stable, and that's always a good thing. The flip side, of course, is that you have to worry about currency risk, exchange rate risk. You heard Michael Wilson talking about central banks. You hear what the Bank of England is going to do, particularly what the Federal Reserve, U.S. Federal Reserve is going to do. If they hike rates, that could lead to capital flight away from emerging markets back to developed markets. That could have its own consequences if we can't attract capital coming into Nigeria. So there is, of course, the continuing discussion around debt service to revenue ratio for us, which is about, 75% or higher. So, again, but for our viewers, the key reason why our total public debt has increased to 38 trillion naira is because of the Eurobond that was issued, which was, of course, part of what our legislatures approved for external borrowing of, I think, about 6.8 billion or so in order to support our budget deficit. So The borrowing continues, but as I've outlaid, you've got your pluses and your minuses. We move to the Central Bank of Nigeria. The Central Bank Governor, Godwin Emefiele, was at a bankers' retreat, bankers' committee retreat, where he talked about the importance. Well, it's a retreat that is supposed to be for rubbing minds together in order to reposition Nigeria's economy to handle unforeseen risks. But he also particularly talked about the importance of credit, not just credit, but cheap credit for SMEs. Let's take a listen.
But I must say that what most people who genuinely have business ideas that they want to turn into prosperity, what they will tell you acts as one of their impediments towards achieving their goals is access to finance. It is just not about access to finance, but access to cheap finance. And I'm happy that through the instrumentality of some of the policies that we have put in place in the last or in the recent years, that we have seen a situation where interest rates on loans, particularly for those sectors that we consider to be priority sectors that will drive growth of our economy, that those interest rates on those loans are delivered at single-digit rate. That people can today also boast and say that they want long-term finance, and they truly are able to access long-term finance of 10 years tenure with about 2 years moratorium, and a single-digit interest rate not more than 9%. I must say this has been achieved as a result of the support and ingenuity all of you that are here today.
All right. So there's also.
Yes, go ahead.
There's
Rotus.
also the fact that 3.5 trillion has been extended from the central bank to critical sectors of the economy, and also since he's Governor Emefiele there talking about cheap credit, the intervention loans that were extended. Remember, it was at 9%, was cut down to 400 basis point reduction to about 5%. So where you see him there talking about the importance of credit, but also single digits, very, very important to the sectors that were able to get their hands on that. All right, so from there to power, very interesting here. There's a letter, I got my hands on a letter from 1004 on Ozumba in Victoria Island. They sent out a letter to their residents. Today is the 15th, right? Yeah, so this letter, there's some key points here, which I thought is a microcosm of what we're seeing in the country. So in that letter that they wrote to residents, because I know a sound engineer that lives there, and sometimes I do voice stuff in the studio, was telling me, Rotus, I've had to increase my costs, what I charge folks to use my studio, because my power tariffs are going up by 15%. They said in that letter there, key things. One, diesel costs are up by 30% so far. Two, they've been subsidizing, to some extent, power for their residents and trying to bear their costs. Three, the power supply in the letter, they said power supply from Echo Disco is abysmal, is what they said. But they said even though it's abysmal, they've still increased tariffs. And they said they can no longer support subsidizing power. And as a result of that, tariffs are going from, I think, about 82, 83 naira per kilowatt hour to 101, a 15% increase, 10 days before Christmas, effective immediately. There's a lot you can draw on from this letter when you think about what the federal government subsidizing power, diesel being unregulated, PMS being capped. I thought that was, you can use that as a case study at LBS if you want to. That's our update.
I mean, that's a microcosm of where we are in this country as we speak today.
Right.
There are different voices. And amidst all of this, purchasing power parity of an average Nigerian has not increased. It has reduced over time. I mean, if you use things like the Big Mac Index, you would see how appalling it is. Only God knows what the cost of a Big Mac will be now in Nigeria. Yeah. When you use that as an index like the economists will normally use. But it just shows all those headwinds, vis-a-vis what the IMF is saying of cost-reflective tariffs and the need for cost-reflective tariffs, which is another headwind that will kick in next year. Yes. Which is another headwind that will kick in when you look at the removal of subsidy coming in.
If they remove it.
If they remove
because
it.
they keep saying they will.
Yeah,
right?
they will remove it. If they remove, that's another headwind. So we have a lot of inflationary headwinds, staring at us in the face. And these are things we should deal with vis-a-vis the insecurity problem. But yeah, CBN governor says, great, there's a need for credit. The problem in this society has always been about credit. Access to credit can revolutionize businesses. Single-digit interest rate, very germane to this conversation. Because when you look at it, give credit to the rebound of the economy, to the intervention of CBN as regards providing credit for those sectors affected by COVID to be able to jack back up, cutting it from 400 basis points from 9% interest rate to about 400. But the question we should ask is, what are we doing about our debts?
Right.
We've increased this debt. We've racked up the numbers. I was saying from 2015, it was about 10 trillion now to 38 trillion.
Right.
And we're not getting in that revenue. We have a new finance bill that says, okay, we'll get money from other places. For making adverts on Facebook and the likes now, you'll pay 7.5% VAT and the likes and all of that. Yeah, but with all of this still pushing the effect on the fact that we're not collecting enough revenue in this country. Tax to GDP ratio is still less than 10%, one of the lowest in the West African sub-region. Benin Republic collects 16% tax to GDP ratio. So those are the headwinds we'll see in the new year.
Very quickly, sorry, you mentioned inflation. We should be getting inflation figures from the Bureau of Statistics as of today, but I'll check the website later. I don't know. The calendar has been a bit off, but we hopefully should get inflation figures for Nigeria year on year for the month of November. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the debt question, 38 trillion and counting.
Yes.
Well, the minister will tell you that we're still within reasonable limits. And the fact that our Eurobond was oversubscribed, perhaps she's correct, because that deserves some confidence.
Yeah.
But experts are also saying if you're spending 91% of your revenue to service your debts, there's a big problem. So where do we go from here? The next president will have a lot of thinking and headache to deal with.
Yes. Well, and that's as of Q3. So we're in December. So we've probably crossed 40 trillion at this point. So again, the first for our viewers,
that's for Q3.
For Q3. We're in the fourth quarter
because
now.
there are many loans still coming in.
Correct.
AFDB loan,
So that number is probably higher as we speak in real time, but that's as of the most recent figures.
Unfortunately, Rotus, I cannot contribute because we have to go.
All right.
Bye.
All right.